God, serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things that I can, with wisdom to know the difference. Now, our main speaker will share his experience, strength, and hope with this. Please join me in welcoming Adam from Santa Monica.
Thank you. My name's Adam. I'm an alcoholic. I want to thank the group, thank Alan, thank you for inviting me to come talk tonight. It's always an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. Ultimately, it's a responsibility to give back what was so freely given to me. Welcome to people that are new. You know, if you're trying AA again, if you don't want to be here tonight, if you didn't identify, if you don't think this will work for you, sorry it's come to this. I didn't get to AA because I had a bad weekend. I had a couple of bad decades, and for me, like a lot of us, eventually this becomes a matter of life and death. I mean, every meeting has their perpetual newcomer, especially if you live in a small community. We see that lost soul recycling through the rooms. I live on the west side. I stood up in AA for 17 years. It was ridiculous. And not to be funny, I had so many chips and key tags, right? We know the drill. Could have played poker with them. I remember one secretary saying, "Give them back." And I did that walk of shame over and over and over again. And looking back at that experience now, I thank God for the unconditional love of the old-timers. A lot of the old-timers that aren't here anymore. A lot of those guys that, they died with 30, 40 years sober. And they watched me come in and out of the rooms, and they would say things to me like, "Don't even bother taking chips. Just sit in the back. Shut up." But in a loving way, right? But they made it really clear to me, and if you're new, I hope you hear this, they made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, because somehow they could see it. They could see it by my demeanor, my lack of interest, my fidgety nature. They had the wisdom, maybe from experience, they had the wisdom to see that maybe it wasn't right now. But those old-timers made it really clear to me that if and when I was ready, that the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous would always be open to a drunk like me. And I think looking back at that experience now, if you're new, next to my parents, Alcoholics Anonymous is the closest thing to unconditional love that an alcoholic like myself will ever experience. No matter how many people I burned, how many lives I destroyed, how many cars I wrecked, how many hearts I broke, how many jobs I lost, how many despicable, shameful things I did. And if you are, in fact, an alcoholic, it's the most shameful thing in the world. To be the family drunk. Especially if you come from a large family like I do. My mom had 3 sisters and a brother. My dad had 3 brothers and a sister. And she told them everything. Right? I got friends here I was in middle school with. One more rubber room, one more institution, one more overdose. Happy birthday, Dad. I'm in jail. I mean, does anybody here relate to being paid? I would get paid not to come home on the holidays. And despite all of that, and I look back at it, you think about it now, talking about Al-Anon, to be able to look now through the lens of Al-Anon, because I was so selfish and self-centered about the destruction that I created, that it didn't even occur to me for the first decade of my recovery. That I was an only child, that I was a straight A student, that I was the top of all my classes, that my mom and dad were married 40 years. I was the hope of that family. And to watch those 2 people literally watch me burn my life to the ground, and theirs too, to the point where eventually my mom had sold the family property, she moved, and she did not leave a forwarding address when I was in an institution. You think it's funny? It's not really. To know that I was the love of her life, and she got to a place where she had whispered to her friends, "I wish he would hurry up and die, at least he'd be out of his misery." I heard her say that. And despite all of that, that high price we pay for this despicable low quality of life, right? The doors of AA have always been open to people like me. If I lived to be 100 years old, I could never pay AA back. For the love and kindness. You know what some of you people have shown me? Not all. I mean, come on. If you like everybody in AA, you know what it means? You're not going to enough meetings, honey, right? I mean, come on. My sponsors say you don't really have to like anyone in particular around here, but you go through the steps and especially the traditions, and you have that kind of metamorphic change, you'll learn to love people here you don't even like. Those annoying, right? Sarcastic, mean people. You just want to, but when you see that guy at 7-Eleven bumming change, pissing in his pants, it still breaks my heart. Something I got here, I think the greatest gift I ever got was compassion for people. We talk about 50% sober up at once, 25% with some relapse. What about that guy that shows improvement? That's the guy. In sales, that's the guy you want to turn. Those are the people that somehow become our very best members. I have to remember the longest trip is from my head to my heart. You know what the longest trip really is? From my knees to the ground. To the point where I'm 100% teachable. And what happened to me is eventually I started coming to meetings drunk. Now the interesting thing about AA 2024, if you actually see a drunk person in a nice meeting like this, people say stuff like, oh my gosh, what's he doing here? No offense, not you, but we don't see a lot of wet alcoholics at AA, and I don't want to bash the therapeutic community. I saw the druggy buggy. No offense, right? I mean, for me, treatment would swoop me up in my most desperate moments, right? Throw me into yoga class. I mean, really? Downward dog? That's your idea of recovery, right? Craft hour. I'm making belt buckles and bogs, right? Come on. Nature walks, please. I'm going to walk to 7-Eleven, get a big gulp cup, fill it up with liquor, put a little Coke on top, walk into the late night meeting, do some of my best sharing. It's ridiculous. Then I started going through institutions. Anybody read the Chapter to Wives? I never read it. I never had a wife. Not of my very own, right? But it's interesting because, and again, just to stir it up, I'm going to stir it up with the Al-Anons a little bit. They always say there's always a saint in the crowd. I tell you, you got a halo, don't let it choke you, right? But the Chapter to Wives talks about 4 types, and it illustrates these types. If you really look at what it's saying, it's talking about the progression of alcoholism. Fun, right? Fun with problems, just problems. How about this? Magic, medicine, misery. A lot of ways to describe it. But the Chapter to Wives talks about 4 types. It enumerates them. And the 4th type of alcoholic that's described in the Chapter to Wives is a type of alcoholic that's been placed in one institution after another. Sound familiar? Type of alcoholic that typically drinks on his way home from the hospital. And in the 17 years that I recycled through Alcoholics Anonymous, in probably one of the largest groups of AA in the world, I still became that 4th type. By the time I finally got sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'd gone through residential treatment for alcoholism 28 times. Right, not 28 days, like, this isn't Hollywood, like the movie. 28 times, and I'm wearing that like some kind of badge of honor. I'm thinking that's what makes me an alcoholic. And I remember telling my late sponsor, he's gone now, but he died sober. I said, I went through treatment 28 times. I was hoping that would get rid of the guy, loser. Right? Go find someone that's willing. I didn't want to ruin his batting average. Those overzealous sponsors chasing me around with a big book. And I told him I went through treatment 28 times, and he says, Adam, that doesn't make you an alcoholic. And I thought, you're kidding. He says, oh no, that just means you paid $500,000 for a big book. I didn't think that was funny. And I'm not going to start citing and quoting pages tonight out of the big book. But page 101 of the big book says any scheme that attempts to shield the alcoholic from temptation is doomed to failure. See, treatment was a great place to fatten me up for another run. Treatment has its rightful place in recovery. Treatment probably saved my life. They do a lot of good work. If you really think about it, even Bill Wilson had gone through treatment. If you ever wonder what all the treatment centers in religion have in common, it's obvious. They all send their drunks to us, right? But my experience is that treatment never solved the problem. And as an alcoholic, like a lot of us, I always thought the problem was alcohol. I thought it was drinking. And I remember someone in Alcoholics Anonymous saying to me, Adam, if alcohol's your problem, that drink, that shot glass, that 12-pack, that little glass of Chardonnay, if that's your problem, you're probably not an alcoholic. And then in the very next breath, he says to me, and if you are in fact an alcoholic, the type that's described in the doctor's opinion, in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, your problem isn't alcohol. And I'm like, what? It took another decade for me to understand what he was trying to tell me. It was almost like some kind of cruel riddle. I drank over that for years. But what happened to me, and this is the thing, we hear that a lot. What happened? What happened to me is I got around a group of big book enthusiasts, people in Alcoholics Anonymous that took the statements in the big book, turned them into questions, directed the questions at me. Very simple ideas like, was I incapable of being honest with myself? Did I in fact drink because I liked the effect produced by alcohol? Well, duh, that's a no-brainer, right? How about this? Was I restless, irritable, and discontent by nature? Was that my natural state before my lips ever touched alcohol? What a powerful question that is. Was my greatest obsession that somehow, someday I would control and enjoy my drinking at the same time? And the last piece, did I pursue that illusion, meaning just out of reach, to the gates of insanity and death? And as I went through those considerations, if you're like me, what happened? There it is again. What happened is for the first time I saw the truth. And the most obvious truth, what we call the external unmanageability, was crystal clear. From the time I was in 8th grade, I was already pissing in my pants. I'm already passed out under the bleachers, right? I mean, my lips, the first time I touched alcohol, I overshot the mark. My nickname in 8th grade was Space Cadet. I couldn't find homeroom. No, I'm not kidding. People were picking high schools. I was already picking rehabs, right? But if you're new tonight, alcoholism comes in people. It doesn't come in bottles or 6-packs or 12-packs or kegs or shot glasses or little glasses of wine or bags. Alcoholism comes in people. And the greater aspect of this spiritual illness, as Bill Wilson describes it, centering in my mind, if going through the considerations in this little book shows me anything at all, it shows me that an alcoholic of my type, an alcoholic of this type, cannot really live without alcohol, not successfully, not happily. And part of what it really means for me to be an alcoholic, if I'm honest about my relationship with liquor, is that I have a mind through my history that continues to take me back to alcohol. If every time I get released from an emergency room, a hospital, right, a fancy Malibu treatment center, men's central jail, right? I mean, think about it. I'm back in county jail again. I can't even count how many times. I'm sitting on my bunk, casually reading a novel, not a cloud on the horizon. And I hear that number, 5743, roll it up. And suddenly, I have this visceral compulsion in me that is so powerful. No matter how long I've been incarcerated, as soon as I hear that number, I can't even stop at the release module for my property. Does this not sound familiar? As soon as I hear that number, no matter how long I've been there, I have this compulsion in me. I can remember vomiting on my way to the liquor store just with anticipation. And you think at that point I'm going to call my sponsor? It's ridiculous. And I hear well-meaning people in AA say things to me like, well, don't drink no matter what. And I'm like, I'm literate, I've read the book. I'm like, what happened at the top of page 24? And I know this is divisive. But it says, every alcoholic passes through the state where even the strongest desire is of absolutely no avail. It says, my willpower will become virtually non-existent. And I know people mean well. And it's maybe heresy to say this at a podium, but Bill said it. There's a world of ignorance and misunderstanding about what alcoholism is. And when people say things like, don't drink no matter what, for someone like me, there's going to be a translation. It's go to meetings no matter what. Work steps no matter what. Maintain commitments no matter what. Be of service no matter what. Develop the discipline of steps 10, 11, and 12, which is peace, power, and purpose. And suddenly, like the doctor's opinion says, as strange as it seems for those that do not understand, he says, once a psychic change has occurred in someone like me, suddenly I'll be easily able to control my desire for alcohol. What a powerful thing that is. And if you suffer from that like I do, my experience is all of my life I was one decision away from a drink, maybe 2 decisions away from state prison. And today, between me and that decision, there's a whole world called recovery. It's about people like you. It's about the rooms of AA. It's about this way of life. It's about a design for living, right? It's about a roadmap to spiritual success. For many of us, it's about this mystery we call God, which, if anything, to me now, is really the product of these other related actions. But if anything, it is a deep and effective spiritual experience. Something that stands between me and that decision. And my sponsor used to say, Adam, it doesn't matter who's wrong. It doesn't matter who's right. It just matters who's left. And when you look at people with 10, 20, 30 years sober that have amazing lives, that are chasing their dreams, that have learned how to navigate around the drama, that have learned how to have relationships that work, what happened is I started to become teachable. What it really means for someone like me to be an alcoholic, again, if I look at my history, is that I had this mind that would continue to take me back to that first drink. It's almost like my default program, like on a computer. And I do, Santa Monica now is called Silicon Beach. You're aware of that? We got about 250 tech companies. If you look them up, they're all there. Yahoo, Snapchat, Google, they're all there. And the funny thing about that is we get a lot of these really smart guys in our meetings. Programmers, right? They build apps. They speak foreign languages like Python, Java, right? Now, for the smart people in the room, here's some math. Potential plus alcoholism equals 0. Like the quadratic formula. So I sponsor a lot of these guys, and they're far my intellectual superior, and I think it's important to talk about this. We talk about the language that Bill Wilson uses in 1939, how really advanced it was for that time period, because today the word program is common vernacular. One of the definitions of the word program, if you look it up in the dictionary, very simple, a sequential set of instructions, right, designed to do what? Bring about a result. Now listen to the parallel language. What do you do when you get a corrupt file on the computer? Well, it's obvious. You install a recovery disk. And the function of that disk is to restore that program to an earlier point in the process, right? How about this? The original self. The restoration, the self that's not corrupted by selfishness, by resentment, by fear, by dishonesty. It never occurred to me that 10 and 11 for some of us become like a viral scan. That if I follow these very simple instructions, what happens when I get to 10 is I become mindful. I become accountable. I become transparent. For the first time in my life, I'm able to pause before I paint the red flags green. Again, I can navigate around the drama. This isn't about putting out fires. I thought that's what it was about. It's about learning not to start them. If I really follow these very simple instructions, I start to become apprehensive before I send that email, before I text her back, right? How can quickly, promptly, immediately, and at once mean at the end of the day? Look at the language. And I start to follow these very simple instructions. And what happens is for the first time in my life, I start to get centered. It never occurred to me when Bill Wilson talks about principles before personalities that it was our founder's future hope that these spiritual guidelines, these principles would have more impact. And I love the fellowship. I love hanging out, going to Denny's, right? The Kettle, wherever we go, the weddings, the birthdays. It's beautiful. But see, the fellowship, he says, and there's a warning, it says it's but one element in the powerful cement that binds us. For me, the fellowship gives me enthusiasm. It gives me inspiration. It gives me encouragement, right? Hope, brotherly love. Some people are finding relationships and employment here now. But if you unleash a character like me into a large group of people like this without guiding principles, you know what happens? My character defects thrive. I actually get sicker in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I saw that consciously or subconsciously. What happened is I would start to become more separate, more different, and more alone. And if you haven't heard that terminology, what it really means is separated from God. It means different than every single person here. We've all heard that, right? Terminal uniqueness. And alone, you know that loneliness, that ache in the heart of every one of us that has nothing to do with the proximity or closeness of other people. In fact, it's right here, right now. That loneliness in the middle of the bigger the crowd, the more alone I am. My own wedding, my own birthday. That self-centeredness. When I hit that pillow at night, if you have that like I do, you know what that is? My inability to connect. And you put a couple drinks in me, I'm calling people from 5th grade saying, I love you. God, I go right into amends, right? Put a couple drinks in me, I'm one with the universe. I'm standing on the roof of my building, howling at the moon. Couple more drinks, I'm okay with me. Get me good and loaded. I lose interest in selfish things and suddenly gain interest in my pillows. I'm drunk dialing at 3 in the morning. And my experience shows me continually that unless I can develop that sense of comfort and ease that I'm seeking from booze through this process, a drunk like me will never stay here. You take alcohol away from me, you have to give me something better. And right next to being separate, different, alone, there are three fundamental ideas. The first is to be protected by some kind of God. The second to be accepted by self. And the third to be connected to a community. That thing, you hear it in a vision for you. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God, 1 through 3. Admit your faults to him and your fellows, 4 through 7. Clear away the wreckage of your past. He says it over and over again. You think you can abandon a ship and go climb back on? You hear it in every meeting. We hear it and we don't acknowledge what it's saying. I go to the ocean with a cup, of course. I get a cup full of water. What if I went with my whole life? What if I came at AA with everything? Take my will, take my life. We've heard it. All of me. My resentment, my fear, my selfishness. Take it all. And you hear it in every meeting. We ask for his care and protection with what? Complete abandon. It's like we gloss over it. The second piece, to be accepted by self, 4 through 7. What that meant to me eventually is if I took those actions, I wouldn't need internal or external validation. I would develop what's called an internal locus of control. It is a product of this action. You can look it up on the internet. It's a clinical term. And the third piece, to be connected to a community. Imagine, protected by God, accepted by self, connected to a community, and I go from being the weakest link in my family, generations of suicide, mental illness, and alcoholism, to 26 years later, the strongest link in that family? It's impossible. Alcoholism is the only disease, when treated, that can actually leave the sufferer in a better position than if they never had the disease. I'd have never believed it. I had such an investment in this narrative of trauma that I couldn't get through it. And they're telling me, oh, the donkey's in the ditch. How does it feel down there? How did you get there? AA's like, get out of the ditch, move forward. Absolutely different. Take the rearview mirror off the car, throw it out the window. It doesn't matter. I reframe it first. I go back and I look at the inventory. I look at these traumatic moments. And then it says step 3 has little lasting effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of it. It doesn't say face and cope with, face and endure, face and re-engage. This was a completely revolutionary way to look at it, to actually be rid of it. I had a horrific childhood. And now I look at it as all of that stuff. I was able to see a silver lining in every one of those things. You know, this thing about forgiveness, and the time goes by so fast, but I want to talk about relationship with my dad. And there was something I wanted to tell you. If I wore an AA t-shirt at an NA meeting, they would never talk to me again. Thank God we don't look like our stories, right? I look back at 17 years of suffering, even in one of the biggest groups in the world. And what I see, if you're new, is my defiance towards spiritual principles. The original manuscript in AA, we know, it used to say, rarely have we seen a person fail that's thoroughly followed our directions. It was very, very, really very strict the way it said it. It said, if you don't believe these 3 ideas, throw the book away. That's the way the book was originally written. And I don't like directions. I don't like being told not to do something I already don't want to do, right? I mean, that's my nature. I will argue with anybody about anything at any time. You tell me it's black, I'll tell you it's white. You tell me it's big, I'll tell you it's small. You tell me to go left, I'll go right with an attitude. It's funny, but that's why we say denial's an acronym. It stands for don't even notice I am lying. Think about it. You could tell an alcoholic, you can't tell them much. Oh, you don't believe it? Try sponsoring somebody. And what that means, if you're new, is you can lead me into the gates of hell, but you can't push me into heaven. And we talk about attraction rather than promotion in the 11th tradition. What that eventually meant for someone like me is eventually I would come back to AA on my own terms. Not because Sober Living wanted me to, not because my parole officer wanted me to, not because DCSF thought it was a good idea. I mean, where I live, they all get sober for the trust fund, right? But if you're new, hope didn't matter to me until I was hopeless. I mean, think about it. You think hope matters to me when I got $1 million of my own money in my pocket, brand new truck, little boat down in the marina? You wouldn't catch me dead in an AA meeting. And my experience showed me that God didn't matter to me until my back was against the wall. And this isn't gutter bravado. I got shot in a little argument, went right through me, and I'm laying on the gurney. I got the paramedics over me with the paddles. You know what? All I know is God. You ever been in a situation like that? There's only two things that matter, mommy and God, right? It's the way it is. And it's funny because if you're like me and you got your head in the toilet every morning, remember the dry heaves where you puke in your stomach out every morning? Who prays more than drunks like us? Come on. And what's so funny about that is Bill Wilson talks about having this powerful white light experience. And on the very next page, so quickly, he says, it was quickly blotted out by worldly clamors, most of which were within himself. He recognized that. And I'm sitting in this cardiologist's office, right? He stuck a tampon right through my chest. That's the way they treat gunshot wounds. And he does what's called an angiogram, and he runs this cord through my groin, and he pumps the dye onto the TV screen, and he says to me, the bullet missed, you're going to be fine. And I went, I've already seen nursery school to that day in about 1 second. My whole life flashed before me. This is where I'm going to die. They're going to pick up my body here. God, I'll do anything. I'll do anything you ask. And in 1 second, I'm like, I need to get out of this hospital before law enforcement shows up. It was like so quick. And if that's funny to you, that reason is because there's a big difference between the act of surrender that gets drunks into AA over and over and over. There's three ways people get here. Crisis, intervention, and they just get tired. The first two did not work for me. But there's a huge difference between the act of surrender that got me here and the state of surrender that keeps the old-timers here. It's a completely different concept if you're new. It's kind of like watching a swan glide across a pond of still water. It's so beautiful, so effortless, so graceful. We all know what that bird's doing under the water. He's paddling like hell. And we have a chapter in the book, Into Action. Ever notice there's no chapter into feelings? No offense. I know the therapists don't like it. Into thinking. But what happened to me is I became willing to take actions I did not yet believe in AA. And over a period of time, those actions changed the lens through which I saw the world. It brought me to a place where I could maintain and develop a state of surrender. And just like gratitude, there's a relationship between those ideas. We were just reading about Tony Robbins' Outside Issue, but he was talking about this 16-year-old kid on the 405 freeway in bumper-to-bumper traffic, and the kid's dancing. He's got this beat-up old jalopy, and, the coat hangers holding the hood together, but he's got his first car, and he's so excited. The radio's working, the kid's dancing in traffic, and right next to them, there's an old guy like me in a Lamborghini Countach wants to rip the steering wheel out. And Tony Robbins says there's only one difference between these two guys. A state of mind, a consciousness. What I thought all my life, like we all believe, is we die and then we go to this place called heaven. And what I found out about AA is so miraculous, is that when we talk about entering the world of the Spirit, we talk about this idea of having heaven right here on earth. By fundamentally being rid of the selfishness, the resentment, the fear, the lies I tell myself, all of a sudden, like Bill had said about Ebby, suddenly I was inwardly reorganized. I had lived in institutions for 17 years. And I became willing to take actions I did not yet believe in. And through that change, instead of having restlessness, irritability, and discontent, what I had peace, power, and purpose in my life. That thing that happened when Roland Hazard had come and talked to Carl Jung, and Carl Jung said this to he was a student of Sigmund Freud's, page 27 of the book. He says, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. Sound familiar? He says, I've never ever seen one single case recover. And Roland Hazard said he felt like the gates of hell had slammed shut, and he begged him, he said, are there no exceptions? And he gives them this description, which later became the spiritual experience. And he said, ideas, attitudes, and emotions that are once the guiding force of these men or women are suddenly cast to one side, and a whole new set of conceptions begins to dominate them. And that is what Bill eventually took to the Oxford group and created this pathway. And to be able to have that spiritual evolution through these simple steps is just a matter of patience and labor. I had to be willing to take actions here I didn't believe in. And thank God we don't look like our stories, right? So what happened to me is I got to one more treatment center, right? It was 120 pounds, dying of alcoholism, stunk like urine. You know we look, right? A vision for you. And and I'm in the detox, in my nightgown, with my ass hanging out, judging the speaker. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's so funny how we're the only people that can be on the curb and still look down at the world, right? I got two speeds, grandiose and comatose. And I'm strutting around the detox bragging about robbing Brinks trucks. I finally did my four-step. It was a bread truck. It was empty. So I know, it's funny. I didn't realize I was homeless, right? Because it was a nice, sober living. Hello? So I'm sitting there, and this woman comes in on an H&I panel, hospitals and institutions. It's also known as homies and inmates, right? It's funny because our H&I is about 250 people. It's bigger than this. Once a month, they meet on the second Monday, Veterans Auditorium. They're fighting each other to get on panels to talk to people that don't care. But H&I probably has the lowest relapse rate in all of recovery. It's amazing. It's amazing. Because you go there, you hook up with 2 or 3 people, you go into a treatment center or a prison, you talk to people, you float out of there. Not just because you're grateful you're not in there, but there's something that happens by doing this. So this woman's on this H&I panel. She's doing her AA talk. We're in the audience. At the end of her talk, she looks us all up and down and she says, if I could give you all the gift of recovery, I wouldn't do it. And I looked at her and I looked at the guy next to me and I remember saying, what a bitch. No disrespect. And then she said something that would later change my life. She said, the reason I wouldn't give you the gift of recovery is because I wouldn't rob you of the journey. And I've been saying this a long time. That journey to recovery, just like that journey to surrender that each and every one of us has to walk, is personal. If you're new, we can't give it to you. Again, not to be divisive, if you were in a hot tub with a supermodel, a fifth of whiskey and an 8-ball, and daddy sent you to rehab, we don't expect you to be happy. Anybody ever get interrupted in the middle like a fifth of scotch? It's horrible. And I came to AA, and I was really young. I was 17, 18. We were just talking about that. Being 18 in AA, back then there were no young people. The old timers were like, you know what, kid, we spilled more than you drank. We're like, you know what, Pops, we didn't spill any. That's why we got here sooner. I mean, you hear a lot of stuff, and you don't hear anymore, right? They say, oh, my worst day sober is better than my best day drinking. Are you out of your mind? My worst day sober is better than my last day drinking. The last 5 years where the disease was killing me every day and it wouldn't bury me. And what happened is I got to a place in my life, because that gift of desperation is a great acronym for God. But unfortunately, like a friend of mine said, desperation and hopelessness are not the same thing. I thought it was desperation. You know what fixes desperation? $10,000. A promotion. Being invited back into the big bed, right? There's a lot of things that'll fix desperation. Hopelessness is when I'm sitting in $1 million home on a piss-soaked mattress and I know the next drink's probably going to kill me and I can't stop myself from doing it. And I get to a place where my head can't get enough and my body can't take any more. Then God means something totally different to me. It means grow or die. Then I'm going to be confronted with an alternative. It's not a choice at this point. My hands are either going to be forced one way or the other. I'm going to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of my intolerable situation. We've all heard it, right? And the other alternative, to accept spiritual help. And it says these are not easy alternatives. Do a survey at Costco. Jails, institutions, and death. Happy, joyous, and free. It's a no-brainer. You step over to my cell in county jail, you ask me that question, I'm thinking, how about an alcoholic death? Can I talk to my counselor, my parole officer, my therapist, my MFT, my dad's attorney, and get back to you on Monday? And I'll justify, minimize, and rationalize my right to get loaded. And what I discovered is that all those things, there's a saying, God can't use a man till he comes to the end of himself. It's such a powerful idea. And what I discovered working with people is that it seems like for all of us, the bottom is the same. The two elements are very simple. When I ask for help, but more importantly, when I'm actually willing to receive it. You know how many people come here looking for help? Imagine, I throw you a life raft, I'll simplify it. You look at the life raft and you think, I was looking for a blue one, man. I really don't like the way you threw it. How do you work with someone like that? You know, I mean, Harvard and Stanford have both done studies on the efficacy of Alcoholics Anonymous. It exceeds all the other modalities combined. The big book is on the top 88 books in the U.S. Library of Congress. It's affected the lives of 30 to 40 million people worldwide. You know why I don't think it's going to work for me? Because it wasn't my idea. It's horrible. So, we're the only people that want a reward because we ran out of a burning building, right? As funny as it is, you know, I started to see that. And I've done a lot of H&I, since we're talking about H&I. I've had panels up at the VA for years. And if you're new, one of the greatest illustrations of surrender I'd ever heard came out of one of those panels. We're doing these panels at the VA, room full of soldiers like this, and they ask us to pick a topic, and I pick surrender. Room gets dead quiet, right? Especially Marines. But if you ever watch a soldier surrender, like in a theater of combat, the illustration's perfect. You'll see the soldier take the rifle, very slowly lay it on the ground, sit down on the side of the road, wait for someone to tell them what to do. I mean, think about it. When you got 40 AK-47s pointed at your head, you don't throw down the gun with an attitude. Right? You're not looking back at the gun, because if you do, someone's going to shoot you. And I had to look at my relationship with alcohol. Am I looking back at booze? You know, it's like I'm in the high school gym 20 years later. The band's gone, the lights are gone, the people are gone, and I'm in this empty, dark room saying, where's the party? There's no disco ball where I was drinking. See, life had its moments, and for those very moments, I was willing to give my life. And what happened is I started to take these actions I did not yet believe in. And over a period of time, again, the perception of this world started to change. I'll close with this idea. If someone did to me what I did to myself, I hate to say this, but I would have killed them, right? If someone did to me what I did to others, I would have killed them. And then I come to AA, and you want me to pray to God. I didn't want God to find out where I was. I was bankrupt in those real simple relationships. If you're new, if you really look at the steps by design, they remedy those three relationships. Steps 1 through 3, recreate and develop a relationship with God. 4 through 7, recreate and develop a relationship with self. 8 and 9, recreate and develop a relationship with others. Very simple idea. 10, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with self. 11, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with God. 12, through service, maintains, develops, and grows my relationship with others. So coming out of the steps, a selfish, self-centered drunk like me, for the first time in my life, is able to live in harmony with God, self, and others. But more importantly, through that psychic change, like it says in the doctor's opinion, for the first time, I'm easily able to control that desire. I don't know how that happened. It was the product, like it says in the 10th step. By now, sanity will have returned. I did these actions up to that point, and suddenly my perception changed. It's almost like some Jedi mind trick. You know, there was a great spiritual teacher talked about the same 3 ideas. They asked him what the most important thing of all your teachings was. He said, love God with all thy heart, love thy neighbor as thyself. Right? Real simple idea. If God scares you out of AA and you're a real drunk, don't worry about it. Booze will scare you back in. So I look at it this way. In 1 through 3, I give it up. 4 through 7, I clean it up. 8 and 9, I make it up. 10, 11, and 12, I keep it up. One of the oldest stories in AA is about this little 5-year-old kid, and everyone's heard this. And the little kid wants to play with his dad, and the dad's trying to occupy this little boy. He's like an accountant, and he gets a thing called a map. Anybody remember maps before Google Earth? There's a thing called a map, and it's the picture of the world, and it's out of a magazine. And the dad rips this picture of the world out of the magazine. He rips it up into like 50 pieces. He gives it to his son. He gives the little boy some tape. He says, what I want you to do, young man, is I want you to put this map of the world together, and when you're finished, we'll play. And he's thinking it's going to take the little boy an hour. The kid, he's like 5. He comes back in like 3 minutes. He's got the whole map of the world taped back together. The dad's like, that's impossible. I'm 50 years old. I couldn't do that. How'd you do it, young man? And the little boy says, Dad, it was so simple. On the back of the map of the world, there was a picture of a man. I just put the man back together and the whole world fell into place. And in many ways, that seems to be the spiritual technology of Alcoholics Anonymous, to rebuild the man or woman 1 through 3 with God, 4 through 7 with self through inventory, 8 and 9 with others through amends, and then to maintain, develop, and grow those 3 simple ideas. You know, when I got out of that 28 treatment center, the guy that was running the detox said to me, Adam, why don't you come back to our lovely hospital next week, tell all the patients here how you managed to stay sober another week if you can make it. And the guy threw me off his property, right? Probably because my insurance ran out. And no offense, but I was so offended by the way he dismissed me that for the next 8.5 years, with this horrible resentment, I drove 2.5 hours in bumper-to-bumper traffic, acknowledged the timer, to tell a bunch of strangers in a detox how I managed to stay sober another week. And guess what? I was tricked into service. All the years that I'd suffered with untreated alcoholism, institutionalized for 17 years, was because I wasn't willing to give anything. It never occurred to me when Bill Wilson got out of his 3rd treatment center, Towns Hospital, 1935, and he said he was a broken man. He'd lost everything in life worthwhile. He was plagued with waves of depression. Bill got a real simple idea. Maybe if I go back in the hospital and talk to some of the patients, I'll feel better. That's all it was. Dr. Silkworth was a double board certified physician, certified in psychiatry and neurology. He went from Princeton to Bellevue to Towns Hospital. He treated over 40,000 alcoholics. And he says, I can't fix you. And he allowed Bill to come into that hospital. And what he witnessed from 1935 to 1939, Dr. Silkworth said, was absolutely amazing. It radically changed the way we look at alcoholism. I don't think much of myself, but I'm all I ever think about. And what happened is when I started thinking about others and helping others. See, alcoholics like me need to be useful more than we'll ever need to be loved. And unless I get that piece, that if I stop drinking, the outsides will get better, but the insides will get worse. And if I don't know how to match that through peace, power, and purpose, especially purpose, I will never recover. I will sit in these rooms and it looks like a morgue in some of these meetings because there's no passion. I hope you stay with us. Thank you.